If you're Aquarius and something inside you has been quietly saying, "Pay attention lately," this message is for you. January 16 isn't just another day. It's a narrow window where opportunity doesn't announce itself, but waits to be recognized. This isn't about sudden luck. It's about a moment where what you've been carrying, what you've delayed, and what's been circling your life finally line up. And here's the part most people missed. The sign isn't loud. It feels familiar, almost easy to ignore. If you felt that subtle pull, the sense that something is shifting but you can't explain why, type "I'm open" in the comments. Not for me. For yourself. Because what opens next only reveals itself to those who stay in the room just a little longer. There is a quiet moment that happens before anything meaningful arrives. Not excitement. Not fear. Just a subtle pause inside you. That pause is familiar, Aquarius. You have felt it before. It shows up in small ways. Numbers repeating when you are not even looking for signs. A thought returning again and again, even after you try to dismiss it. A strange sense that waiting no longer feels patient, it feels complete. Not empty, complete. You did not come here because you were searching for answers. You came because something inside you recognized a tone. A frequency that feels close to your own. And no, this is not prediction. Nothing here is telling you what will happen. This is about timing. The moment where your awareness and an opportunity quietly occupy the same space. Most people miss that moment. Not because they are unaware, but because they are distracted. They are trained to expect signs to be loud, dramatic, undeniable. But Aquarius, you have never been wired that way. You notice shifts before they have language. You feel change before it asks for action. And lately, there has been a sense that something is aligning without forcing itself. You may not be able to name it, but you can feel the difference between noise and signal. This feeling is not excitement. It is steadiness. A grounded clarity that does not rush you forward, but asks you to stay present. And that matters more than you think. Because opportunity rarely arrives when we are searching for it. It arrives when we stop pushing and start listening. Let me ask you something gently. When was the last time you felt this calm before a shift in your life? Not the chaos before change. The quiet before it. That is where you are now. You are not behind. You are not early. You are exactly at the intersection where readiness replaces effort. And this is important to hear. Nothing needs to be proven in this moment. No convincing. No chasing signs or trying to decode meaning. Just noticing what is already responding to you. There is a difference between waiting and being available. And availability does not look like urgency. It looks like presence. A clear mind. An open schedule. A willingness to respond instead of overanalyzing. You have done enough preparation. More than you give yourself credit for. This space you are in right now is not empty, it's receptive. And that is why this moment matters. Because when alignment arrives, it does not ask for belief, it asks for attention. So stay here with me a little longer. Not because something dramatic is coming, but because the most meaningful shifts often arrive without announcement. And the ones who notice them are the ones who were already listening. Pause with that. And notice what starts to surface next. There is a reason this moment feels different to you. Not louder, not more dramatic, just quieter in a way that gets your attention. You have lived long enough to recognize the difference between excitement and truth. And what you are feeling now is not excitement. It is a subtle recalibration. You have believed before. You have tried things that asked you to trust without proof. And at some point, disappointment taught you something important. Not to stop believing, but to believe differently. That is why you are no longer chasing miracles. You are not impressed by promises. You do not need to be convinced that something good could happen. What you want now is alignment. You want things to make sense without forcing them. You want effort to meet response. You want timing to feel respectful of the life you have already lived. And here is the truth that does not get said enough. You are not lacking ability. You are not missing talent, intelligence, or depth. You have all of that. What has been missing is the right intersection between readiness and invitation. Between who you are now and what is available to you. That gap can feel frustrating, especially when you know what you are capable of. But that frustration has not been wasted. It refined you. It taught you discernment. It taught you when to say no without guilt. It taught you to stop giving your energy to places that only took from you. You may have wondered at times why progress felt slower than it should. Why things seemed to circle instead of land. But consider this. What if you were not being delayed? What if you were being prepared to recognize something subtle? Because abundance, real abundance, does not rush in with fireworks. It arrives when you are stable enough to hold it without losing yourself. That is why this phase feels different. You are no longer asking life to prove itself to you. You are asking yourself if you are available to respond when it does. And availability is not about doing more. It is about being in the right internal posture. Calm enough to notice, clear enough to choose, grounded enough to move without panic. Let me ask you something. If an opportunity showed up quietly, without drama or guarantees, would you recognize it as progress? Or would you overlook it because it did not match the struggle you expected? This is where many Aquarians pause. You have been conditioned to associate growth with effort and resistance. But what is approaching now does not require force. It requires presence, a willingness to engage without overthinking every outcome, a trust in your own judgment shaped by years of experience. You are not being tested right now. You are being invited. And invitations are easy to miss when you are used to surviving instead of receiving. Take a breath here. Notice how this moment does not feel urgent. It feels precise. That precision is not accidental. Stay with that feeling. Because what unfolds next does not ask you to change who you are. It asks you to meet life from the place you have already grown into. And from here, things begin to respond differently. There is something about certain days that feel thinner than others. Not lighter, just thinner. As if the space between intention and response becomes easier to pass through. January 16 carries that quality. It is not dramatic. It does not arrive with signs pointing at it. In fact, if you are not paying attention, it will look like any other day on the calendar. But you, Aquarius, have learned that timing is rarely loud. This is not a day that promises sudden wealth or instant reward. Nothing here is about shortcuts. What makes this moment different is not what it gives, but how easily things begin to connect. Around days like this, life tends to speak in practical ways. An email that arrives sooner than expected. A message that feels oddly well-timed. A conversation that opens a door you did not realize was unlocked. Small things. Ordinary on the surface, precise underneath. And precision matters more than magnitude, because real opportunity does not need to impress you. It needs to fit. You may notice that effort feels slightly more responsive now. That when you reach out, something reaches back. That decisions land more cleanly instead of looping in your mind. This is not momentum you create by pushing harder. It is momentum that appears when resistance softens. That is why chasing does not work here. When you chase, you narrow your vision. You focus on outcomes instead of signals. And this moment is built on noticing. Noticing what repeats. Noticing what feels aligned instead of urgent. Noticing what comes toward you without pressure. Let me ask you something quietly. When was the last time something meaningful entered your life gently, without demanding that you prove anything first? That is the tone of this window. It does not require risk. It requires attention. You may feel tempted to dismiss what shows up because it seems too simple, too ordinary, too familiar. But familiarity is often how alignment introduces itself. You have spent years refining your sense of discernment. You know when something costs too much energy for too little return. You know when a door looks open but feels wrong. Now there is a subtle shift. Some doors do not ask for persuasion. They simply respond when you show up honestly. This is not about believing in timing. It is about cooperating with it. You do not need to rearrange your life. You do not need to prepare yourself further. You are already prepared enough to recognize what belongs to you. The only real question is whether you will stay present long enough to notice it. Because moments like this do not wait for certainty. They wait for availability. And availability does not mean saying yes to everything. It means saying yes to what feels quietly right, even if it does not come with guarantees. Pause here for a breath. Notice how nothing about this feels rushed. It feels intentional. And that intention is not asking you to act yet. It is asking you to observe what begins to surface when you stop trying to predict and simply pay attention. Stay with that awareness. Because what follows this moment does not arrive through force. It arrives through recognition. There is something important to understand before anything meaningful can land. Abundance rarely arrives dressed the way we expect it to. Most people are taught to recognize value only when it looks impressive. Large numbers, clear titles, obvious rewards. But real abundance does not knock loudly. It does not need to announce itself. It often arrives quietly, almost unremarkable, as if testing whether you are paying attention or still waiting for something bigger. You may have noticed this before. Moments when something small crossed your path. A conversation that lingered longer than usual. An idea you had once dismissed, returning with new weight. An invitation that felt casual on the surface but stayed with you afterward. These are not coincidences. They are beginnings. For someone like you, Aquarius, this matters deeply, because you are not motivated by appearances. You are motivated by meaning. And yet, even you can overlook what does not immediately look like progress. We live in a culture that celebrates outcomes, not openings. But abundance does not begin as an outcome. It begins as access. Access to a person, access to information, access to a different way of thinking. Money, when it comes, usually follows those things, not the other way around. This is why so many people miss what is meant for them. They are waiting for proof before they allow curiosity. They want certainty before they allow engagement. But life does not work that way. The door rarely looks impressive from the outside. Sometimes it looks ordinary. Sometimes it looks like something you have seen before and decided was not worth your time. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever traced a meaningful change in your life back to a moment that seemed insignificant at first? A single conversation, a small decision, a yes that did not feel dramatic but felt right. That is how abundance usually moves. It does not overwhelm you. It invites you. And invitations are easy to ignore when you are used to measuring value by scale instead of alignment. What you are being asked for now is not belief. It is presence. To listen without rushing to judge. To engage without demanding guarantees. To notice what resonates before asking where it leads. This is not about lowering your standards. It is about refining them. You do not need everything to be perfect for it to be meaningful. You need it to feel honest. There is a quiet confidence that comes with maturity. The kind that knows not every opportunity arrives fully formed. Some arrive as seeds. And seeds require patience, not pressure. You are capable of holding that patience now. You have learned the cost of forcing outcomes. You have learned the value of timing. So if something presents itself without fanfare, without urgency, without spectacle, do not rush past it. Pause. Ask yourself not what it promises, but what it opens. Because abundance does not always look like money at first. Sometimes it looks like possibility. And possibility is where everything real begins. Stay with that awareness. There is more unfolding just beneath the surface. There is a quiet irony in how deeply thoughtful you are. The very quality that makes you wise is also the one that sometimes keeps you standing still. You see more angles than most people. You sense consequences before they unfold. You can imagine 10 outcomes before others even see one. That has protected you in many ways. But there is a moment when protection turns into hesitation. And hesitation, when it lingers too long, begins to look like absence. You do not miss opportunities because you are careless. You miss them because you are careful. You wait for clarity to become certainty. You wait for logic to remove all doubt. You wait until every variable feels accounted for. And life rarely offers that kind of permission slip. Most doors do not stay open while we finish thinking about them. Not because life is unfair, but because opportunity responds to readiness, not perfection. This is something I have noticed again and again. The people who receive are not always the most intelligent in the room. They are not the most prepared on paper. They are simply the most available. Available to respond instead of analyze. Available to engage instead of postpone. Available to trust their lived experience. You have earned that trust, Aquarius, through years of trial and recalibration. Through mistakes that taught you discernment instead of shame. And yet, there is a habit that still whispers quietly. Just wait a little longer. Just make sure. Just be certain. Let me ask you something softly. How many times has certainty actually arrived before the moment passed? If you are honest, you know the answer. Life does not reward overthinking with reassurance. It rewards presence with response. This is not about abandoning reason. It is about allowing intuition to sit at the same table as logic. You do not need 100% certainty to take a step. You need resonance. That subtle inner yes that does not shout, but feels steady when you listen closely. When you ignore that signal, you do not stay safe. You stay disconnected. And disconnection is far more costly than a misstep. The shift for you is not dramatic. It is almost gentle. It is learning to notice when thinking becomes a delay tactic. When analysis turns into avoidance dressed as responsibility. There is nothing wrong with you for doing this. It is how you survived complexity. But survival and receiving are not the same mode. Receiving requires openness, a willingness to respond before everything makes sense. It asks you to trust that you can adjust as you move, that you are capable of course correction. And you are. You have adapted before. You have navigated uncertainty with grace. So if something reaches you now, quietly, without demanding proof, do not dismiss it because it feels unfinished. That is how beginnings often feel. Pause when you sense yourself overthinking. Ask not what could go wrong, but what might open if you respond. Because the moment you stop waiting for perfect clarity, life begins to meet you halfway. And that meeting is where things finally start to flow. There is a relief that comes when you realize you do not need to run toward what is meant for you. You have spent enough years pushing, proving, adjusting yourself to fit moments that were not ready. Your nervous system remembers that pace. the constant readiness, the subtle tension of trying to stay ahead. But what approaches you now responds to something very different. It responds to calm. Preparation, in this season, does not look like effort. It looks like space. Space in your calendar, where you are not filling every moment just to feel productive. Space in your mind, where you stop replaying old conversations and rehearsing future ones. Space in your relationship with money, where you are no longer making decisions from fear or scarcity. Clearing space is not dramatic. It is quiet. It is choosing not to carry what no longer belongs to you. And once there is space, something else becomes important. Responsiveness. You have strong intuition. It speaks clearly but softly. And intuition has a short window before it fades into second guessing. There are moments when you feel a clear internal nudge. Send the message, take the call, say yes, or say no. Those moments do not repeat themselves loudly. When you respond while the signal is warm, things move easily. When you delay, the energy cools. Not as punishment, just as physics. Let me ask you something gently. How many times have you felt a clear inner knowing, only to talk yourself out of it later? Responding faster does not mean acting impulsively. It means respecting your own awareness before doubt takes over. And then there is the part that many people struggle with the most. You do not need to explain your worth anymore. You have nothing to justify, nothing to convince, nothing to over-articulate so others will understand your value. The right doors do not require a resume of your pain or your perseverance. They recognize you when you arrive. Explaining yourself repeatedly is a sign you are in the wrong room. There is a deep exhale available to you here, the kind that comes when you stop auditioning for acceptance. Abundance moves toward calm confidence, not urgency. Urgency signals lack. Calm confidence signals readiness. You do not need to rush to prove you are worthy of what is coming. Your presence already communicates that. This phase is asking you to soften without collapsing, to be open without being needy, to be available without being reactive. That balance is something you have earned with time. So slow down where you have been rushing, respond where you have been hesitating, and stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. Notice how different life feels when you move this way. Less resistance, more response. This is not hustle energy, it is alignment energy. Stay here in this posture for a moment, because when you prepare to receive without force, what arrives does not feel overwhelming. It feels right on time. And from this place, something quietly important begins to take shape. There is a moment that does not announce itself as important. It arrives quietly, almost politely, and because of that, many people walk past it. But you feel it. It is not excitement. It is not fear. It is a stillness that asks a single question inside you. What will you choose differently this time? Not dramatically, not loudly, just differently enough to change the direction of things. This is where everything shifts for you, Aquarius. Not in action, in decision. You have learned that massive change does not come from massive effort. It comes from one clear choice that interrupts an old pattern. A yes that replaces hesitation. A no that replaces obligation. A pause where you used to rush. A response where you used to delay. Nothing about this asks you to become someone else. It asks you to stop repeating what no longer fits. If you trust, even slightly, that opportunity is closer than it appears, then listen closely to what rises next. What is one thing you feel invited to say yes to? Not because it is impressive, but because it feels aligned with who you are now. And just as important, what is one habit you are being asked to release? Not forever. Just now. Perhaps it is the need to over-explain. Perhaps it is the tendency to wait for external permission. Perhaps it is the reflex to stay small until you are absolutely sure. You do not need to overhaul your life. You do not need to make a bold announcement. You do not need to prove anything to anyone. This decision is private, almost invisible from the outside. But inside you, it changes everything. Because once you decide differently, your energy shifts, your posture changes, life begins to respond in new ways, not immediately, not dramatically, but consistently. This is how momentum really begins. It does not come from pressure, it comes from coherence. When your actions finally match your inner truth, even in small ways, the friction eases. You stop wasting energy on what drains you. You stop circling what you already know, and clarity appears not as certainty, but as direction. Let me ask you something softly. If you knew you could not make the wrong choice here, what would you decide? Sit with that question for a moment. Notice how the answer does not shout. It settles. That settling is your signal. You are not being asked to leap. You are being asked to step. One step that breaks the old rhythm. One choice that honors who you have become. This is the kind of decision that does not need validation. It only needs honesty. And when you make it, quietly, without fanfare, something inside you relaxes. because you finally stop waiting for the right moment. Stay with this awareness, because what follows is not a demand. It is an opening, and how you walk through it begins with this single, quiet decision. All right, stay with me here, my friend. This moment does not rush you. It simply arrives the way truth often does. There is a quiet awareness settling in now, not loud, not dramatic, just clear. January 16 is not a promise, it is not a threat, it is a window. And windows, as you know, do not chase anyone. They open, they offer light, they offer air, and then, gently, they change. Nothing is forcing you, but something is inviting you. You might feel it as a subtle pull in your chest, a calm curiosity, a sense that something you have been preparing for without realizing it is finally within reach. For Aquarius, opportunity rarely looks like fireworks. It looks like recognition without explanation, a conversation that lands differently, an option that appears when you are no longer desperate for it. This window does not ask you to become someone new. It asks you to arrive as who you already are, more settled, more honest, less willing to negotiate your inner truth. You have lived long enough to know that not every open door is meant to be run through. Some are meant to be walked through, with presence, with discernment, with your shoulders relaxed. And here is the part few people say out loud. Abundance does not respond to urgency. It responds to calm confidence. That is why this moment feels quieter than you expected. No pressure, no countdown clock screaming at you. Just a choice that feels different. If you believed, even for a second, that what you need is closer than it has ever been, what would you say yes to now? And just as gently, what would you finally stop doing? Not a dramatic ending, not a bold announcement. Just one small decision that breaks an old pattern. Maybe it is choosing not to over-explain yourself. Maybe it is responding when your intuition speaks instead of waiting for certainty. Maybe it is clearing a little space in your life so something new has room to land. Aquarius energy matures into its power quietly. You do not chase the future, you align with it. And alignment is subtle. It happens in pauses, in honest moments alone, in decisions that feel simple but echo for years. This window does not stay open forever. Not because you will be punished if you miss it, but because life moves. Energy shifts. Timing evolves. What matters is not whether you leap. What matters is whether you recognize the invitation while it is still warm in your hands. If something in you feels open right now, you can mark this moment in the smallest way. Not for the algorithm, not for approval, just for yourself. You can type quietly, without ceremony, "I am open to receive," and then you breathe. No rush, no pressure, because the story does not end here. It softens, it deepens, and what waits on the other side of this window is more you than you expect. All right, stay with me just a little longer, Aquarius. If you have listened this far, it is not by accident. Something in you recognized itself along this journey, not as noise, but as resonance. This message was never meant to push you forward. It was meant to remind you that you are already standing in the right place. Calmer than before, clearer than before, more aligned than you may realize. What opens for you now does not need force. It needs trust. Trust in the timing that has shaped you. Trust in the wisdom earned through every pause, every delay, every moment you thought nothing was happening. This is the Aquarius way. You do not rush destiny. You tune into it. As you move on from this moment, carry one thing with you, a gentle confidence, not loud, not proving, just steady. Let the world meet you where you are, instead of chasing where you think you should be. Let opportunities recognize your frequency. Let abundance approach you the way it always does, quietly, respectfully, when you are ready to receive it. If something in your heart softened tonight, acknowledge it. You can mark this moment by leaving a simple comment below. I am open to receive. Not for me, for you. And if this space feels safe, if these messages feel like home, stay with us. Subscribe, not out of habit, but out of trust, because this channel is not about predictions. It is about remembrance. You are not walking this path alone. There are other Aquarians here who feel what you feel, who are learning to move with life instead of against it, who are choosing calm confidence over urgency. The journey does not end here, it deepens. The next message is already forming, and when it arrives, it will meet you exactly where you are meant to be. Until then, trust yourself. You are doing better than you think.